So, our first point within this presentation is culture shock. Some resistant strategies within this are culinary bridging. By bridging culinary brilliance into one's cooking practices, people are able to further incorporate other cultures and unfamiliar cuisines within their everyday foods to make the meal seem more approachable and appetizing. Culture shock is doubt, confusion, or anxiety arising from immersion in an unfamiliar culture. Culture is the sum of the social categories and concepts we operate within addition to beliefs, learned behaviors, and practices, which is everything but the natural environment around us. Key traits within this include anxiety when people experience stress when they're trying to adapt to new situations, confusion, lack of understanding, uncertainty, and the struggle to adapt, some difficulty adjusting to new practices such as unfamiliar food or dining customs. The importance of this is because food is an essential part of everyday culture and is more than just food, but a way of people expressing themselves, connecting with others, and passing on their heritage. An issue within culture shock is through different cultures, many people use their cooking as a way to express themselves as a form of gratitude and want to share their practices. The drawbacks of culture shock in different cuisines in different cultures cause different problems. Culture shock may cause being offended by perceived rudeness of culture, not understanding workplace norms, struggling to navigate the bureaucracy of a new country, difficulty communicating, and struggling to eat the food of in a new country.
Hello, my name is Beto, and I will be covering climate change. Many of the foods we consider staples are tied to specific regional climates. The Mediterranean diet, rich in olives, grapes, and wheat, is a direct result of hot, dry climate of Southern Europe. But what happens when the climate changes? Rising temperatures and extreme weather events are threatening the crops that have defined regional cuisines for generations. Vineyards in Napa Valley are struggling with heat waves that affect grape quality, while farmers in the Midwest face unpredictable rainfall, impacting corn production. In response, many regions are adapting. Farmers are turning to new techniques like drip irrigation and crop rotation to cope with changing weather patterns. Chefs are also reimagining traditional recipes, incorporating more climate resilient ingredients like millet instead of wheat. Despite these challenges, there is a growing movement to preserve regional food traditions. To preserve the rich diversity of regional cuisines, and local food movements have emerged. Initiatives like the Slow Food Movement focus on supporting local farmers and celebrating traditional dishes. Local food festivals and farm to table initiatives celebrate the resilience of regional cuisines, ensuring that even as the climate changes, our food heritage endures. By adapting to the changing environment, we can continue to enjoy the diverse and unique flavors that have defined our regional food practices for generations. It's a demonstration of our ability to innovate and preserve the cultural significance of food in the face of regional challenges.
This is Roman. Here is our main point, number 3, which is modernity. This is the point that we are talking about, which is changes in food over time and how it relates to social change due to newfound knowledge. Our resistance strategy to this is a community based agriculture and a preservation of traditional foods. By incorporating these community based agriculture and preservation of traditional foods, we are helping those cultures alive as well as preserving the practices and resisting globalization and industrialization of food. This is our intro to modernity. The definition of this is the modern way of life replaced by the pre modern period with the rise of science and objectivity. Key traits within modernity within food is food fear and loss of food heritage. How much consumption of particular foods in the culture, risks of consumption of traditionally cultural food or fears that restrict diet, and loss of recipes due to the food modernity. The importance of modernity is by a comprehension of Christopher Cressane in 2020. For example, in recent years, researchers have presented studies suggesting that routine consumption of blueberries lowers a person's risk of developing type 2 diabetes. This would mean that with new science and new knowledge that we have come to understand and adapt into our society, it has changed the way we eat and in the way we think about the type of food we eat, as it would lower our risks of any health issues. And although this is important for our health, it is something that also changes the way we eat foods, which can change traditions. Connection to modernity is Rie Tannehill famously remarked that without food, there would be no history. Moving past food as a biological necessity has sometimes led to the heart of historical issues, but instead to a deeper thinking about food. Issue within modernity. The most significant issues with changes in food practices is sustainability. Industrial agriculture weakens soil, contributes to climate change, and often exploits labor. What this does is that it threatens long term sustainability of the cultural traditions of food and well being of communities or even cultures themselves. Modernity affecting sustainability will cause environmental loss and even health impacts. For experts, 27.5% say that the consumption of typical foods in places of gastronomic offer or street vendors is not affected by microbiological, chemical, or physical risks, economic inequality, and cultural loss.
Hello, my name is Nicholas, and the fourth main point to go over will be gender. Um, Food is not just nourishment, it's a lens into social norms. Research shows how food practices reflect and perpetuate gender roles. For example, in India, cultural norms give men the best food, while women are left with inferior portions and leftovers. Similarly, men often select high calorie foods tied to masculinity, while women pick low calorie options to align with beauty ideals. These practices reveal how gender and food are interlinked, shaping identity and inequality. Now, these food dynamics extend to broader issues of power. Women face malnutrition and exclusion from food related policymaking due to patriarchal norms, as noted by Dash and Mirash. Donaldson emphasizes that these practices are rooted in historical and environmental contexts but are not fixed. Meanwhile, another research shows how societal pressures influence eating behaviors, reinforcing stereotypes. Advocates call for women Advocates call for including women's voices in food policy development to challenge these structural inequality, and promote fairer systems. The resistance strategy I came up with would be to challenge gender norms behind the preparation of food, not completely reversing the roles, but balancing them to create happier and healthier relationships. This does not mean completely reversing the roles, but making it a partnership where both individuals take part in planning, preparing, and cooking meals. Such a balance can strengthen a relationship by ensuring that no one partner feels overburdened by the task, contributing to a happier and healthier dynamic. Food is more than a necessity, it's a stage for negotiating identity, power, and equality. Changing these patterns requires changing cultural norms and amplifying marginalized voices in policy decisions.
All right. How's it going, everyone? So I'm going to be highlighting main point five of our presentation, and we really focused on overall nutrition, but I decided to take on the part of, socioeconomic barriers to healthy eating. I took a class in high school that really focused on this part, so it was intriguing to really look into. Um, so obviously, the interplay between wealth, socioeconomic status, and dietary habits perpetuates inequality and access to healthy foods. The key factors driving this disparity is going to be affordability, availability, and generational influence. In simple terms, if you grow up a little bit less fortunate, as a household, um, your income and your pocket is not going to be able to be spread out as much as others. So your mom or whoever's doing the shopping is going to be forced to you know buy foods with less cost, and typically foods with less costs are going to be less nutritious, less nutrient dense, and for kids that has a really big effect. So structural issues such as education, awareness, and food accessibility are vital to addressing dietary inequalities. The interplay between wealth, socioeconomic status, and dietary habits creates significant barriers to healthy eating, with factors like affordability, availability, and generational influences. So now we're going to look at affordability and diet quality. So obviously, rising household incomes often increase food consumption rather than diet quality. So that kind of is an interesting thing to look at because yes, if a household generates more income as a family, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be healthier. In a lot of cases they have the resources to, but that doesn't typically translate to a healthier family. Um, so education and support structures are critical for translating income into healthier dietary choices. So increased spending on food, excuse me, doesn't guarantee nutritious selections without the proper guidance. So you might think that because you're spending a little bit more on your groceries, let's say 30 to 40% rather more than the average American, you might think you're going to be getting better ingredients, but um, with how the FDA works and everything, I mean, we a lot of things, the labels are lying to us, and labels are lying to us, and typically, even organic products sometimes, if you dig deep into the ingredients, sometimes they're not as good as we really think. So many families prioritize other expenses over healthy food, at the cost of basic necessities like housing, utilities, and transportation. And that is typically when, the budget is a little tighter. Next, we're going to talk about, geographic and community disparities. So in low income or rural areas, access to fresh and nutritious food is limited, because one, the demand isn't as high there, and it is, let's say a produce distributor. Typically, they're going to want to limit their distribution to areas that make more sense for them. If they're going to send a truckload of a higher quality product somewhere, it's harder to split it up to an area that's not going to need as much. It saves them fuel, and there's a lot of costs that go into it that we might not always think about. So in those areas that don't typically, use that much, there's not as much demand. That traffic isn't going to head there, for the better quality ingredients. So like residents in deserts are more likely to have poor diets, which can lead to increased rates of obesity, diabetes, and other chronic health conditions. Uh, geographic, excuse me, geographic inequality in food access leads to health disparities, with poor areas suffering the most. So, you can see um, this graphic over here to our left is kind of, charts out how exactly this moves, and the population growth and immigration/refugees, and how all of that really impacts